So it has been a very long time since I've uploaded to this channel, but the concept is still the same. This channel is an experiment to try and push me to do things that I would otherwise not be doing, and hopefully get some feedback from whoever's watching the video. So anyway, today's experiment, I got bit by the rock climbing bug, but going to rock climbing gyms is really, really expensive. So what I have done is made kind of a training wall almost in my small 600 square foot apartment. We have a 1-bedroom, 1-bath apartment and not really much space to work with. So I drew some inspiration from kind of hang boards that go above door frames for rock climbing indoors for training, and also some inspiration from some feature walls just for decorative feature walls for homes on Pinterest. And I came up with something like this, which I hope isn't so much of an eyesore. And then I bought these completely black climbing holds. I bought a set of 40 of them from Escape Climbing, and they seem to do the job really, really well. I got the textured natural pack of 40 of them, and they're very, very grippy. Almost all of them are all kind of crimps or pretty good deep jugs where they have nice positive kind of cutouts in the back. Or you can kind of flip them upside down, and a lot of them have these kind of cut-in features that resemble rock formations. So you can put them upside down, put them sideways, turn them into crimps, do whatever you want with them. So what I did was, this is also kind of an experiment in that this climbing setup is kind of a stylistic experiment to mess with some designs to hopefully put onto a bigger wall that hopefully my wife would let me put in a living room when we buy a house soon. We'll see how that goes. If it looks good enough now, maybe it would look good enough on a larger scale. And like I said, this is just an experiment, kind of a trial run, and I can do an uglier wall in a garage or something like that, maybe in an attic space, and turn it into a cave. But it also comes with kind of these much smaller grips. But almost all of them kind of have at least a little bit of, at least a crimp or kind of a jug in each one that you can kind of get a hold of. Maybe you could put 2 of them together if you wanted to drill your bolt holes really close together and just turn it into, turn 2 small ones into a really nice pinch or something like that. Who knows? I'm very new and I don't know what I'm talking about, but to rock climbing, that is. But anyway, so I'll demonstrate. And I just threw couch cushions underneath me here. Go, shoo, which the dog is lying on, as kind of a crash pad in case I fall while I'm climbing. So there's kind of 2 ways I like to do this. I put a small strip here with some foot cleats, which I'll re-explain in a minute when I do some close-up. But I put these small foot cleats here to kind of just give my foot somewhere to go so that I'm not scuffing up the door frame so much. And then I put a wider section, about an 8-inch section of board here with 5 bolt holes with T-nuts on the back so that I could put actual climbing holds here. And the intention for this one is really just to have somewhere to place my foot and kind of start a climb much lower. So anywho, here we go. So. I haven't really laid out routes for this yet, but also something to point out is that I have some kind of crimpy in cuts on these boards here that get kind of larger as you go up on the board. So anyway, that's that. Pretty cool.
So what I've done on these boards is, especially with these lower boards, I've kind of used scrap wood that I already owned. And so this one, I believe, is 3/4 inch ply screwed directly into the stud adjacent to the door frame, and then some scrap, just wood that I've turned into cleats for feet. And each of these boards has a paint job on them to where it's painted black, one layer of wet paint, and then sand drizzled on it for texture, and then painted over again to seal that paint in. And it gives you this really nice textured surface that you can kind of push off of if you don't have quite great foot placement. And it kind of resembles that of a legitimate climbing wall. So this one, again, is scrap wood. However, this one's significantly thinner. It's about, I want to say this one's 1/2 inch ply, and that's 3/4 ply. The 1/2 inch ply seems to do pretty good with another 1/2 inch spacer back here, which just kind of keeps the nut and the bolt from hitting the wall when you fully screw those down onto the board when you install the holds. So each one has that texture. And I just went with a really neat little chevron design and stained the wood before I painted it, and then sealed everything with a spray polyurethane. And then here's this one again on the top. As you can see, each one of these strips of wood gets thicker and thicker as you go higher on the board. And the idea behind that, I know that as you go from the bottom, it's very, very difficult right out of the gate to kind of hang on to these little tiny crimps. I really don't have the finger strength to hang myself from them yet. And so you would think at the beginning you would want the larger ones at the bottom so you have more of an easy grip. But my thought process was that as you're hanging, if you had the larger ones down below, then those would interfere and kind of rub up against your forearm as you're hanging. So I just chose to put some quite large jugs here that are really, really easy rock wall holds to get me to the top. And then I can train kind of on the hangboard from there. So anyway, this is supposed to be kind of an experiment in just an at-home rock wall that potentially looks really good and isn't an eyesore. And I guess the only other bit of information that I'm leaving out is that each of these bolt holes, this one has 5 in an offset pattern, are 8 inches center to center. And then the next row is 8 inches, would be 8 inches if I had holds there and there, but I don't. And each one of these strips is glued and screwed in from the back. So none of the screws are visible, and each one has a ton of wood glue on it so that they look nice and you can't see anything from the front. Also, additionally, on the tops of each of these holds, I've kind of sprinkled some black sand and clear coat the same way that I did with the black paint and sand. So the sand is black. So on holds like that one, you can't really see it as sand. It kind of blends in with the whole wall, but it still gives you that grip. Now I'm just going to talk a little bit about the overall construction process that I used to create this board. I started with a 3/4 inch piece of plywood that was roughly the size of the space above my door frame, and then I finished cutting it down to size with a jigsaw when I brought it home. I used some scrap 2x2s, and those were these long strips of wood that I kind of just cut into random pieces and trimmed them down to where they were the thickness that I needed to create the hangboard effect that I wanted for this wall. I then angled the jigsaw and took just kind of curved chunks out of each one of these strips that I'd created so that each one of these strips was less of a hangboard and more of a rock climbing feature in some of the spots along the board itself. I then glued and screwed everything together on the board itself and drove the screws in from the backside so that you couldn't see them from the front of the board. It ended up being a little bit of a problem that I just did all this with a jigsaw, because the backs of each one of these strips wasn't perfectly flat or level to the board itself, and so I had to kind of go in and backfill some of these strips that had a lot of void space behind them with extra wood glue. It ended up being okay. It just took a little longer, and I had a lot more squeeze out than I wanted, which filled the pores of the wood themselves, and it ended up not looking the way that I wanted to when I went to stain the board, which was the original intent, was to have the whole thing look like wood. And because of the wood glue just being so obvious and looking so bad, I decided to mask off each one of the strip holds, the strips of wood, and painted the whole board black. While the paint was still wet, I drizzled some sand on the board to give it more texture, waited until it was completely dry, and then put another layer of paint on top of the sand, even though the sand that I was using was black sand. I ordered black sand because when I clear coated each one of these strips, I still wanted to apply a little bit of texture to the top of each one of these wooden strip features. And I thought that the black sand would look better on a dark stained piece of wood. I did the same process that I did with the paint and sand, but instead of using paint, I used spray polyurethane and just applied a really generous thick coat first before applying, and sprinkling the sand onto each one of the strips. Then I went back and just did a finish coat over top of it and a nice thick coat of polyurethane on top of it to seal everything in and prevent the sand from flaking off. Some of the larger pieces of sand still kind of flake off, but good riddance. They're just tearing up my hands anyways. I think the smaller to finer pieces of sand are what I really want, because that just gives a texture to the top of the climbing board and gives me something to grip rather than having a smooth surface that my fingers just really slip off of. I ordered these climbing holds from Escape Climbing. It's the Textured Natural 40 pack, which is 40 pieces. I think it's a really good package. It comes with a lot of holds that are really large, generous holds, and some small ones that are more of a crimp than jugs. And these large jugs I used and applied them closer to the bottom so that I could kind of climb the wall and get to the taller strips, the thicker strips on the top when I'm training, or not even training, just really having fun with this board, because this is really a substitute for a home board and less of a training tool, but it could be used in both applications.
Well, pardon the shaky camera footage. I decided to go ahead and test climb before doing the handheld footage. But either way, hope you guys appreciated this experimental rock climbing wall setup in a small apartment. And if you would, just like, share, subscribe, do all the YouTube things, and share it with somebody who might be interested in this. Because I think this might be a really good option for people who don't have the space to put a full home wall at home and build one of those, or someone who doesn't have the financial ability to constantly be going to a climbing gym or paying for a climbing gym membership. So, thanks for watching. See you guys in the next one.